On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Tori. And Tori was married to a controlling, altruistic abuser. It's a story of future faking, idealization, cults, proving yourself, chaos, and grief. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Tori. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. And if you want to be a guest like Tori is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Top of the page, there is a button that says guest form. And when you click on that button, it takes you to our guest form page. There you can read all of our instructions and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. And today we're going to hear Tori's story, which is about her experience in a marriage with an altruistic abuser. But we do spend time as well explaining the cult background which Tori came from. She was also inadvertently involved in a cult while on a mission. And there is no content warning for this episode either. So there's no content warning for this episode. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Tori, once again, thank you for being here, and the floor is now yours.
Thanks, Brandon. So basically, I guess I'll start off when I was growing up, because now that I'm out of this, I look back and I can see how I grew up kind of shaped the type of person that I would be choosing. Um, so I grew up in a charismatic Christian home. My parents are still married, almost 40 years. So I grew up in an environment where divorce was looked down upon. Being a single parent was looked down upon. Very much, you choose the right person and you stay with them no matter what, even if it's difficult. My mother, I can see quite clearly now, was a little bit emotionally unstable. There was a lot of physical abuse early on in my childhood. It stopped when I was about 10. But in the early days, there was um, a lot of hitting, a lot of like pulling of my hair. She was just very, whenever she would get upset, I have two younger brothers. We're each about a year apart. So she had 3 and 3 years basically. And, I'm sure that's frustrating for anybody. But um, not being able to emotionally regulate herself led her to a lot of violent outbursts. My father, he also believed in corporal punishment, but he did not do that very much. He was definitely the calm, patient one that we would go to when we needed something, or if we needed to tell, that we did something bad without a crazy outburst. We would go to my dad about it because he was a lot more calm, a lot more understanding. I can see how both of my parents came from abusive families as well. My dad's childhood was very horrifically abusive, as well as my mother's. So I can see how their patterns of, continued, how they treated us similarly to how they were treated at some points. So I can see how that continued. My dad jumped around through jobs a lot. This kind of plays into the person I would marry later, but he wasn't very stable with his jobs. And that paired with my mom and her emotional instability, my childhood was happy, but it was also not stable in many ways. So I was the oldest. Definitely a little bit somebody who would kind of stand up. I always felt like I wanted to stand up against injustice and I wanted to help people. So this kind of clashed with my parents, who were very much of the belief that, if you have a strong will, it needs to be broken. And this was also kind of within the very Christian way of training your children back then, was you had to be seen and not heard. And if you spoke up for yourself, you were rebellious, and that was a bad thing. Um, so my mom and her siblings were very body conscious, health issues and body image issues with them. So by the time I reached puberty and I was developing early, I would constantly hear things about my own body and about my appearance. Um, they would tell me that I needed to go running, and they would comment on my weight. Oh, you look like you gained weight. Oh, you look like you need to lose weight. And when you're 10 years old, that's that's a horrible, hard thing to hear, no matter what age. But at 10, that really does some makes for some deep scarring and deep wounding. So this also plays into, I felt like I had to prove um my worth and how I looked. I felt like I had to prove that I was beautiful, and that no, I wasn't going to have these weight issues. This led to eating disorders when I was older, in my 20s. But it also led to this feeling of having to prove to people and to myself that no, I am beautiful. I, great. I don't have problems. So that also shaped type of men that I dated and the type of person that I married later on. Later on, when I was 14, my parents moved us to a Bible school in the middle of New York State. They had been talking about this school since my childhood. Um, they met somebody there. They thought it would be a great idea to get more training and education in theology for themselves. So they moved us there. They had housing on campus. So we lived as a student family on campus. I went to high school outside of campus in the very small town nearby. But what my parents didn't know is that they were walking into a cult. Um, the leader was revered and loved. There were a lot of controlling practices, things that were happening that I thought were a little funny growing up as a teenager. And, I would, people in my public school would call me cult girl because everybody else knew it was a cult, but the people in it didn't think it was. I would go to the leadership about things and confront them. And then I was told, oh, you have a rebellious spirit. Oh, you're out of control. And so I just kind of grew up with this mentality of like, oh, no, I'm bad. I'm rebellious, but I want to be good. But again, wanting to stand up for injustice or things that I saw were wrong or weird.
So, when it comes to your childhood and interacting with other people your age, you already said that you would get called cult girl at school. So, are you able to have friends understand maybe a little more about what's going on in your home and the life that you're living with this cult isn't traditional or normal to the rest of society? And I guess, how are you feeling at this time? And do you have a sense of self in the sense of, I want to break out of this? Like, I know this isn't me. What are your hobbies and things like that? Or are you allowed to have anything like that in your life?
Yes, yes. So I have always been fortunate that um, I usually have a good, solid group of friends. In high school, I had a very close knit group of friends who were not a part of this cult. They were in the community, and they were great. they would they would call the cults out and the weird things out. And, they had a running joke about like, oh no, don't, if they offer you Kool-Aid, don't drink it. Like, uh, they, It was great for balance. And yes, it did really help put things in perspective because I would see like, oh yeah, you know, it's like I was living two lives. So the life at my high school was very normal, and my friends and I was allowed to have normal friendships. So like we would go out and do normal teen things, and we would have sleepovers at each other's houses, and we'd go to parties and stuff. So it was a pretty normal experience outside of the campus. But once I was on campus, it was like a different world. It was completely different. So I was allowed to have hobbies. I mean, I was a very artistic person. So, I was allowed to have my hobbies and have my friends. And I really appreciated that because there were other families on campus who were not as fortunate and their parents weren't as lenient. So there was definitely a big spectrum of the types of people that were there. But as far as my like how I felt, um, especially during high school, I didn't feel too weird, and I thought it was funny. People would call me cult girl, so I wasn't ostracized at school. Um,
So at the age of 21, you go on a mission. So tell us about this.
yes. So, yep. After I kind of finished up my Bible schooling, I went to France and I decided that I was going to I wanted to work in the development field, or I guess in Christian terms, I wanted to be like a missionary, right? So I wanted to spend my life helping people. I didn't know exactly what that looked like back then. I just thought, like, oh, I'm going to help the needy. I didn't really have a clear understanding yet of what that meant. So I thought, okay, well, I will just join this program that sends young people out to these different countries, and they have different bases around the world. I got sent to France. That was a culture shock in itself. But then also, so I went from this controlling environment. I got out of it for a few years, and then I went back to the Bible school. And then I got out of that and made my way to France. And I thought that I was okay, finally I'm on my own. I'm free. I can spread my wings and be this person, that I really dream of being, right? So I get there, and it is also a very, very highly controlled environment. There were many cult like tendencies, and it's actually been debated whether or not this organization is another cult. But I will just point out the cult like tendencies. Our schedules were very controlled. We were told to wake up at 6 a.m. Every single minute of our day was planned out. We were not allowed to have alone time. Our food, uh, they were a bit scarce with their food sometimes. So it could lead to like food deprivation and sleep deprivation, which, is a great tactic for controlling people. We were kind of, alone in the middle of nowhere again. We did not drive places. Our town was like this tiny town in the countryside of France. I couldn't drive, and they wouldn't let us drive, and they wouldn't drive us anywhere. So we weren't allowed to talk with the opposite sex. We weren't allowed to have relationships. We weren't allowed to talk to our family about what was going on. Um, they were very controlling about, if you needed a break. There were some mornings I was so exhausted, I wanted to skip a class, and they would have the entire school on hold, uh, and they would wait for me or wait for whoever it was that was trying to skip out on class. And if they couldn't find you, they would hunt for you. And they would spend the day looking for you until they found you, and then you would get in trouble. I also uh, found out that you were paying these fees. So you were a student first. I was a student, and then I decided to join as staff. And that was when the abuse really ramped up and the controlling environments really ramped up. Um, I learned that they forced you to go to these confessionals every week. So you would confess and confide in this person who was your, counselor. Well, as a staff member, I got to see behind the scenes and I learned that everything that you told your counselor was written down and put into a notebook that was then given to each teacher that would come talk to the students. And so, very manipulative. If you were, say, you were having issues, I'm having issues with this, and you tell this counselor in confidence. Well, then this information would go to this teacher, and then all of a sudden, this lesson would be directed. You would feel this lesson. Oh my goodness, this lesson is directed at me. Wow, like God must be really talking to me, but it was not God. It was uh, personal information being leaked to these people. There's a lot of financial abuse and financial control in that environment as well. That was very isolating and damaging. I had a really emotionally hard time with that. And it was also very sobering because I went there thinking that I was going to help people. And I actually was silenced for, I would say, like, hey, aren't we supposed to be helping people here? And, I was told that didn't know what I was talking about and that I was, wanting to be rebellious and that I didn't understand the program. So I decided after almost 2 years there that, you know, this was not what I had pictured in my mind. And this was not the place of, I thought it was going to be a great place to learn and grow and help people. And it was nothing like that. So I decided to leave. Um, but again, I, I was like met with this fact that I was like in this very controlling cultish environment. And it felt like I couldn't get away from it for a while.
So, how are you feeling after this? And I say that in the sense of, are you lost in the sense of what to do with your life or who you are? Because these institutions in which you have grown up in and then thought you were going to be doing something, very powerful and something good for the benefit of mankind, shows itself to not be true. So, are you trying to wrap your head around what is going on and who is trustworthy or anything like that? Do you have like a conflict inside of you going on at this point?
Yes, definitely. I left and I went back. I lived in New York for a while. I lived with one of my best friends. And for the next few years, it was definitely a struggle of kind of, yeah, trusting leadership. I couldn't step inside of a church for many years. Um, it was, a big test of faith, having to deconstruct and reconstruct what I believed and who I thought, you know, this God that I was serving was and is. And my entire belief system shifted. And it was really hard. It was hard to relate to people who were still in this. I was still friends with a lot of people in these worlds, and it was really hard to relate. It caused a big rift between my closest friends who I went to college with, that Bible school with, caused a lot of relational rifts because I felt like they didn't understand and see exactly how disturbing these environments were. Um, One of my best friends actually married into the family who led the Bible school. And so I felt like my relationships were really strained with the people in these worlds. So there was definitely conflict about who I was and what I wanted to do because, my whole life, I felt my identity was kind of rooted in the fact that I wanted to do these things for the world and to help people. And I kind of built my reality and my identity around being this type of person. So when I got back from France and from all of the schooling, yeah, I was lost. There were, I would say, about 4 years, a good 4 years of kind of relearning who I was outside of being that type of person. And, kind of awakening to, you know what, there are people all over the place around me every day who, you know, are struggling with things, who, need a friend. And so I really kind of took the focus off of like this big picture that Christianity kind of paints of like, you have to save the world, and actually it just kind of helped me focus on my community and the people around me. And, if I really want to make an impact, I don't need to go to these big countries. I don't need to go to do these, you know, very showy things. All I need to do is just be genuine and love the people around me. So it was good. I would say that it was, a struggle uh, for, yeah, about 4 years. But I think the result of it was actually really good. I felt like I matured a lot as I was working through, you know, my identity crisis.
So this story isn't about being in a cult. It's part of your story. And for you, this story is a relationship story. So for you, at this point of your life, going through all of these things already, how are you viewing relationships? And I assume you're viewing it from a very faith based way. So, what is it that you are looking for in life when it comes to relationships? And do you have any other belief systems about relationships or who you are looking for before you get into the relationship that we were about to talk about?
Um, you know, I had like my ideal of somebody who wanted the same things, somebody who was kind and generous and believed in helping people as well. I knew that it was important for me to be with somebody who um, was also, interested in a life of service and like helping people, who was very community focused. So that's always been a big draw. Somebody who, maybe was from a different culture, or somebody who really embraced culture and was not, afraid of differences in different cultures. So that was kind of my ideal, what I idealized in my head. Now I like dated casually in my 20s, and never anything super serious. Um, I did have, I had two serious ones, and um, they didn't work out. But I wouldn't say that they were necessarily huge red flags. So they just, life just took us different ways. But I was always searching for this ideal of this type of person that I wanted to be with. I wanted to be with somebody who shared the same, like, um, values, and who wanted the same things, who would be okay with maybe living in a developing country, and maybe not the greatest living circumstances. I wanted somebody to be open to that. So it felt like it was a very niche type of person. So I did feel like I was having a harder time finding that type of person. Um, yeah, so I kind of idealized and idolized the type of person that I was looking for.
So tell us about the meeting of the person that the story is about.
Yeah. So um there was this website that it's a dating website for people who are interested in development work and relief work, and interested in finding somebody, who wants those things too. So I went onto this website. in 2016, and I was just kind of looking around and I started talking to this guy. I thought he was really cool. He worked in with refugees. He worked in like inner city America and was building these community gardens for refugees, and he had been overseas, and he just really seemed like wow, this is really awesome that he's doing this. Life happened. We ended up going separate ways. We didn't really talk that much. um, I had other things going on in my life. He had other things going on in his life. So for the next couple of years, for the next 2 years, I was dating other people. But in the back of my mind, I was getting discouraged because these people that I was dating didn't want the same type of lifestyle, didn't want to do the same kind of things. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, you know what? Well, there's somebody out there, because there's that guy who is working with refugees in the inner city and making gardens. And like, if that guy's doing the thing, then there must be other people out there, right? So he was kind of like, I was holding him in my head as like, this ideal of like, oh, well, there's a good person who's doing these good things out there. So I'll find somebody eventually. Well, 2 years later, I'm back on this website and I start talking to this guy and it feels very familiar. And then I realize, like, oh my God, it's the guy. It's the guy. It's the guy that I've been like, you know, keeping in the back of my mind for some reason. Like we're starting to talk again and we both realize, oh my gosh, we've talked before. So we start talking again and we realize, like, oh, you know what? Maybe we need to pay attention if this is the second time we're talking. Um, I was in California at the time. He was in Minnesota. Um, I was fresh out of a relationship and he was fresh out of a relationship. So I said, you know what, can we just take this really slow? I know we're, very far away from each other, but I just want to see how it goes. Let's just talk and be friends first, and let this develop slowly. Well, he was very persistent and he was not very good at listening to my requests for taking it slowly. So we talked for about a month, and then we met in person. And within the first meeting, he asked me, well, how long do I need to date you before I can marry you? And, I was like, wow, maybe let's take it slow. Let's just date. Let's just focus on dating first and see if that's going to go well. So we spent some time dating um, long distance. One of the things that I would call a red flag that happened, right off the bat, was that he was never willing to fly out to see me. It was always my time and my money and my efforts going to see him. So the dating with him long distance was like a rush. He love bombed. I guess really great at future faking. He immediately started planning our life together. And so I guess the real draw of this whole thing, and I'll talk about it later. The real grief that I still feel sometimes is that he was so great at portraying being this exact person that I had idealized. He would say, "Oh my goodness, like we're going to go to this country and do this thing, and this is how we're going to live our life, and we're going to help these kinds of people, and this is what I'm doing this weekend to help these people." And he just made our relationship, it was very much focused and centered on the type of life we were going to build together. So it was always future focused. It was always like, um he would say, "Oh, you really want to do this thing, right? Well, we can totally do it, and this is, how are we gonna do it?" And we would spend hours just planning our future. It's really easy to get sucked into a relationship with somebody who talks about your future so wonderfully and so passionately. He was just very passionate about the life we were going to have together. He also came from a cult. Um, his family was part of this very fundamentalist Christian background. So he is part of this homeschooling cult. And so that affected him in certain ways, and I, can definitely see how that affected him during our marriage later on. Um, so we would bond over, oh my gosh, these cults, and we would bond over our religious trauma and our shared beliefs. So the dating was very up and down. I started seeing flashes of, these dark moments that he would have that I didn't really understand, and I didn't really wanna look in the face when I was dating because I was so set on this being my person. And, I was 30, we were 30 when we started dating, so, I was ready to settle down, and I just really wanted to believe I had found my person. So, there would be dark moments where he would call me really moody one night and be like, "Well, I wanna go to Iran." And I'd be like, "Okay, all right, well, we can talk, in the future. Like, you want to go now or later? Because we can talk about things, and try to just approach things calmly." And he would say, like, "Well, I know you really wouldn't want to go with me, so I need you to prove that you would be willing to go to these places, you know, and if there's wars going on, you need to prove to me that you would want to be there with me." And so I would have to, I'm eating dinner and this guy's calling me, asking me to prove that I would want to go to these war torn countries in order to marry him. So I would have to, he would say, "Well, can you just like come up with a plan of like how you're going to do it and how we're going to get there?" So I would get a pen and a paper and I would write a timeline of like how we can get from point A to point B and all the steps you would have to take to get to these countries because to work in different countries with organizations there's a lot of red tape you have to go, there's a lot of vetting that goes on. It's a few years worth of work to actually get to these countries and to have jobs and different things. So you know I would write these illustrious plans of like, "This is how we can make this happen." Then he'd be like, "Great. I guess you're serious." And then he'd hang up. And I would be so shaken, like, why did I just need to do that? And then the next morning he'd call very chipper and happy and, in love with life and in love with me and everything was great. There would be moments when he would, call me asking me for money and I would be thinking, "Oh, well, that's not the greatest, but you know what? Like I'm investing in our future together, right? So like if I'm helping him out with something, like I'm investing, right?" I didn't really think to ask about if that was a habit or not, or I didn't know how to go about finding out if that was a habit. Um, but that was just a foreshadowing of the financial situations later on in our relationship. So we were actually dating. We only dated about 7 months, all long distance. And then he found a job in Iowa. Um, he asked me to move to very rural, very isolated part of the country with him. And I said yes. Um, he had told me that he didn't believe that women um, were worthy of engagements. He told me he didn't believe in engagements, that he just thought that, we were going to get married and he didn't believe in waiting on women. And so I always wanted to elope and I always thought, oh, a whirlwind romance sounds amazing. So, but even I was hurt at him saying that I wasn't worth an engagement. So I told him, well, you know, you at least, if you want to marry me, you at least have to propose to me. And, at least doing me the honor of asking me to marry you. So I went to visit him and he did propose and he did not have a ring. But he was like, "Oh, I will get you a ring." So the night before I go to move out to Iowa, um, he calls. He's supposed to fly in to drive back with me. He calls saying that he doesn't feel like flying, that I can just drive by myself. And I told him absolutely not. You are going to I had bought his ticket. Um I told him that I needed his help, and then he circled back around to, well, you don't really want to go to Iran with me. And so he was for some reason using that. And I asked him, do you have cold feet? Are you not wanting to do this? No, no, no. I just want you to prove that you can do this. So eventually he does end up flying out. We drive back, and the next week we get married.
Hi, everyone. I know many of you are always looking for new podcasts to binge, and I binged the podcast Nobody Should Believe Me, and I loved it. It is a groundbreaking investigative true crime podcast about Munchausen by proxy, hosted by author Andrea Dunlop, who's been a guest on our show before. And all of the 8 episodes of season 1 are out now, and they are ready to binge. And it is consistently on the Apple True Crime charts. And guess what? Season 2 is airing now, and I am very excited about it. And it is covering a shocking new Munchausen by proxy case, talking to survivors, and going deeper into Andrea's story too. So if you need a new podcast, I'll be listening to Nobody Should Believe Me, and I think you'll enjoy it too. Nobody Should Believe Me is available on all podcast apps. So before this marriage, a lot of stuff has gone on. And the love bombing happened. You like him. He's this idealized image that you have in a big way, where that image carries you a long way. And he's this quote unquote altruistic person of how he presents himself to you, the world, how he wants to be seen. And behind the scenes, you have someone who wants you to jump through hoops and wants you to prove yourself, how worthy you are. He is someone who lives in a patriarchal system and how he views women. And this is someone who already is showing you, his cards as far as, what's the best way to put it? He is showing you not just who he is, but like a runaround. Like you had a question for him, and he then deflects it to, well, you have to prove yourself to me. So he's, right away, like if you're going to ask him a question, he's not even answering that question. He's figuring out how to put it already back on you and put you on your back foot. And, you're already having to ask for your basic needs to be met in this instance. And it sounds a lot that your idealization of this person is overriding all of these things. And it's not a bad thing. This happens to so many people. It's just the reality of what was going on, and there's no shame in that. And because this person is also someone that showed you that, after you kind of go along with something or it gets diffused, that he's back to whoever he was before. So
Yes.
it's very confusing thing to be in, especially when it's this whirlwind, which is what it is going on. You throw that whirlwind in there and see you later. So now we're at the point of your relationship here where you are about to get married. So tell us what happens from here.
Yep. So we get married, and I will have to say, even on our wedding day, I noticed a shift um, in how he treated me. So we wanted to elope. Um, Planning of everything, of course, was on my shoulders. So he couldn't, the courthouse wasn't open on the weekends, and he couldn't take off of work. So we got married on a Monday on his lunch break. He didn't even want to take the whole day off. We got dressed up. We didn't have any family or friends because um, family relations on both ends were a little bit rocky, and we just both wanted to do this independently. Though I will say, looking back, I can see the lack of um, him inviting his family into this relationship was, I believe, because of they understood who he is, and they know his reputation and his past. So he was kind of shielding me, I think, from maybe getting some warnings from his siblings. um, so yeah, even our wedding day, he took off. He took a lunch break, got married, and then he was late from work that day. So I was in the middle of nowhere, uh, without a single friend, and just kind of alone on my own wedding day. And if only I had knew that was kind of just a foreshadowing. That was just kind of a snapshot of our marriage in general. Pretty much immediately after that, I noticed that I was the only one cooking, cleaning, paying the bills, being the responsible adult. I was pretty much the only responsible adult right off the bat. He would very subtly start saying, our first argument, I remember a first argument about something, instead of it coming to a conclusion where we both sit down and say, you know what, I see this. I'm really sorry about that. And there's a resolution and a change. It was actually, he said, like, well, if you had a six pack, then maybe I would, not feel this way towards you, and I would not argue with you. And when you started bringing up my appearance, the fact that I didn't have a six pack, it triggered me back to being, child, and hearing about, my appearance and my weight. And he knew that I had had eating disorders in the past, and he knew that I was really sensitive about that. So I think that tended to be a weapon that he would use sometimes. And so that from the get go made me feel like, to be worthy to get the basic love and respect that a wife deserves, I had to look a certain way and be a certain way. And so he set that precedent right off the bat. After about 3 months, he decided that he wanted to quit his job that we had moved to the middle of nowhere for. Um, So I had given up my career. I was a successful nanny, a professional nanny in California, and I made very good money. And so I gave that up, and I decided to move, a different direction with my career. In rural Iowa, it's very hard to find careers and jobs that pay well. So within 3 months of our marriage, he quit his job, and I was supporting us on very little money. It started escalating after that. Once he quit his job, he started going to bars a lot. Now he drinking is definitely a problem that he had. I wasn't really aware of it while we were dating. When we got married, I saw that he had a drinking problem. So he would tell me that he was going to coffee shops to find work. But then I worked in a clothing boutique, and women would come in. It was a very small town, and women would come in and say, "Oh, I know your husband. He comes to my bar all the time." And she would be, a bartender. She would tell me that she saw him all the time. And so I confronted him. And of course, this is the first time that I heard that I was controlling and nagging, because I'm on his case about being in bars when I should just mind my own business. And it's not necessarily like, okay, so you're going out for a drink every once in a while. That's fine. But when you're spending your days there, and any extra money that you have on beers, and these were the first instances where I found out that he was also talking to women and other women, and getting their numbers, so freshly married. I started getting messages. I would get messages from women uh, saying, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know. I didn't know he was married, but now that I know that he's married, I just wanted to let you know. Your husband was hitting me up at the bar the other night." So I started getting messages from women, and I would bring them to him and confront him and say, "What is this? Who is this?" Um, and again, I was the issue. I was the problem. I was the one believing these women over him. I was the one, what am I doing not minding my business? So while this is going on, I'm just very confused because this is not the person I thought I was marrying at all. This is not the life that I signed up for. This is not, you know, this is not what I had planned. And so I had in my mind this idea of, being in the honeymoon stage, blissfully married, you know, 3 to 4 months in. Um, and it's actually it's stressful. It's confusing. He's not respecting our marriage. He's not respecting me. I'm just very confused. And none of it makes any sense to me. So I don't really talk to people about it because I don't know. Like, I know that's not healthy and it's not normal, but I don't really know who to go to or who to talk to at this point. Though I do start wondering, oh, maybe he has mental health issues, like maybe he's bipolar or something. I was starting to question his mental health. But I was like, no, surely not. Like, he would have told me if he had these issues, right? Um, so one day I get home from work and he's looking his eyes are very wide, he's looking very intense, he's very agitated, and he tells me that he is joining the Navy, and then if I don't go with him, then um I can just leave right now. If I'm not going to support him in his decision to leave for the military, then I can just say goodbye. And it was so out of the blue and such a shock. I didn't take him seriously at first. He was very adamant. He was joining the military no matter what. And this was something we had talked about when we were dating. I, had made it clear, like, I don't want to live the military lifestyle. That's not for me. That's not what I'm into. And he had never really said that he, was interested in that lifestyle. So when he brought it up, it was just so out of left field that I was just really shocked and confused again. Like, why, why would you do this? We're so freshly married. Like, I think I'm just so confused because this is all such a big switch so soon. So, for the next 7 months, um, 7 months to a year, he is stuck on this idea of being in the military. Now, he does get another job. He does eventually get a stable job. We finally moved to a different place that's a few hours away, that has more people, there's more things to do. And I'm really relieved because then I can build community and I can feel like I have my life and a life of my own. I am able in this new place, I'm able to start a new career. Well, I can take my side hustle career of marketing and I kind of turn it to my full time career. And I'm really excited and I'm feeling very proud of myself that that I'm flourishing in my job. And he's at this job, but it becomes his job, then becomes his focus. So this whole time, let's say the whole first year, I am just trying to scramble, just trying to get him to see me. There is at no point in my marriage did I feel like my husband looked at me and saw me. Like, when we were dating, for the most part, when he was good in his good moments, he would make it seem like I was the answer to all of his dreams. And like I was also the person that he had spent 30 years looking for. And, I was also the idealized version of, you know, this person. Like he he just made it seem like I was also, yes, the answer. Okay. So But when we were married, it was like, yeah, it was like trying to be seen. I would try so hard. I was successful in my job. I was, successful in my hobbies. I was really growing in my friendships. But he would make these remarks all the time about how I wasn't enough. I wasn't trying hard enough. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't making enough money. The house wasn't clean enough. My friends weren't cool enough. So he was never able to keep friendships. But my friends that I developed, my friendships and relationships that I developed just weren't cool enough. They weren't the right type of people. No matter what I did, whatever I put my mind to do, uh, it was never enough. So yeah, I spent the first year of our marriage just really, really trying to figure him out and trying to figure out how to get him to love and respect me, which is a terrible thing to have to do in your first year of marriage.
And when you're confronting him about these things, what are his reactions?
Uh, yes. He, when confronted, he gets very, very cruel. Um, he gets really angry. He, at first he didn't seem like he was a person that would yell or become aggressive, but I quickly found out that when I would confront him on his behaviors, um, he would yell, he would get icy, icy cold. And I actually sometimes preferred him yelling over him becoming icy. Because when he became cold and cruel and calculating and demeaning, that that was when it was really awful. Whenever I would confront him on things, he would threaten that he was going to leave me. He would threaten divorce all the time, all the time. Any sort of difference of opinion, any sort of confrontation of, hey, you know what, you did this thing and it really made me feel not great. That hurt my feelings. Any sort of negative confrontation at all would lead to him threatening to leave or divorce me. Um, so it became just a cruel game of me confronting on things, him getting either overly aggressive and um, not really physical, but his voice would raise. He would become verbally abusive. He would call me a bitch, a nag, a controlling bitch. Bitch was usually his favorite word. So he would get verbally abusive. So after a while, I learned that confronting was not the answer. It was not how I was going to get my point across. So in this dynamic of the Christian faith that he was in, there's very set gender roles. And women are supposed to be silent and submissive, always pleasant, never angry. And I grew up with a very emotionally volatile mother, um, who, yelled and screamed. So and I had to work very hard at learning nonviolent communication. I had to work at learning, okay, how do I get my point across to him very sweetly, very meekly? So, um, if I was indignant, if I was upset, if I was feeling hurt, I learned to go to him with a smile and like sweetness in order to temper his temper, in order to keep him calm. Um, but Um, it didn't matter how sweet I went to him. If I went sweet, he might respond back a little bit sweetly, but then continue to do the the habit. Um, continue to do the hurtful things that he was doing. So sweet or sour or angry or quiet or loud, or I learned there was no way of getting to him. So, but I did learn that if I wanted to have a good day, then I better not confront him with a harsh tone. So I learned very quickly to mellow myself. Um, and it even got to the point later on in the marriage where, if I was excited about something or passionate about something, and I went to him, it would annoy him. So I learned to really just mellow myself in general as a person. Definitely when he's was confronted about things, sweetness was the way to go.
So another thing with him is he's already acting in a completely different way than when you met him, and chaos has started to ensue already. But chaos is going to continue for you because this is someone, and a lot of people deal with someone like him who can't keep jobs. And that becomes a different type of chaos because this isn't just yelling and, the emotional abuse or verbal abuse or physical abuse. Now we're talking about home finances, stability of household, keeping you off balance in this other way because so many things are going on. So when it comes to him and this type of chaos that he's going, like that he's creating in this way, that's affecting you. Tell us about this aspect of your life.
Yes. So in the 3 years that we were married, he had about 20 jobs, give or take a few. Um, he he would come to me and say, "Oh, I found this job. I just really feel like I'm supposed to take this job. I just really think it's the one. It's going to be so great." And because I was so desperate for him to stay, just be happy. I just really wanted him to be content with his life and just be happy. Like, sure, yeah, you can do it. I believe in you. I was very supportive. I tried to be very supportive. Uh, when he would come to me so excited about a job, so he would start this job, and some days, sometimes a week or 2 would go by and he'd tell me he quit the job because, there's somebody there he doesn't like, or they have a policy he doesn't agree with, or he got into an argument with his boss, or he just thinks that he's worth more. He shouldn't be working for this low of pay. Um, so I was trying really hard to be the stable one. So I was working at my job, working 9 to 5. Um, and he was just all over the place. This brought a lot of financial instability into our lives because even though I was working a very nice, stable job, it's still the Midwest. The pay is not the greatest. And we needed 2 incomes. And so having to rely on somebody who just refused to be reliable was really stressful. And so, yeah, he just job to job to job to job to job. And with each decision, he acted like, he was in the right about everything. So this is the job. This is the job. This is the right job. I know it. I know it. And if I ever voice concern, which I started to towards the end, I started getting a little bit more harsh on things like, you know, you need to stick this one out. You have to stay there. Promise. I would beg him, please stay there for at least 6 months. Just please stay there for at least 6 months. It didn't really matter. He wasn't thinking of me. So it didn't really matter what I said or did. It Nothing affected his choices. He chose on a whim, on feelings, whether or not he wanted to keep a job or stay at a job. Sometimes he got fired from jobs because he was late, or he would be forgetful about things. So if he lost a job, if he was fired from a job, I would even try to be supportive in that, like, oh, I'm sorry, I know things happen. It's okay. We'll pick it up. You know, I encouraged him to go back to school. He went back to school for a little while to get his graduate degree. But he would not stay on top of his homework. He eventually racked up student debt, and then dropped out. His instability led to us being really financially unstable. At one point, we were making, really good money, but you would never know because on top of the job instability, there was also lots of spending. So, um, I was the one making sure all the bills were getting paid. There's only so much control you can have over a person, right? And I had to learn this. Like, I would try so hard to to give him a budget and be like, "Hey, you know what? Like, we have this much to spend, and you really can't spend any more than this because we need to pay our electric bill." And it didn't matter. He would he would spend hundreds or thousands of dollars a week on tools, or he would go to pawn shops, or um, oh my goodness, schemes. Like, he invested thousands of dollars in this Bitcoin scheme, like, just just things that can be so infuriating. Um, but I wasn't allowed to get frustrated. So I had to be pleasant through all of this while I was scrambling so hard to keep this. I tell people that living with him was like living with a tornado constantly, because everything was awry, everything was crazy all the time. In every facet of our life that could possibly be upset, he upset it all the time. And there was never peace in any facet of our life. If one area was going really well, then another area was just completely out of balance. So the work issue was an issue throughout. It was, I would say it was one of the hardest things to deal with, because, it would just throw off the rest of our life. That was definitely something that I did not like having to deal with. Also, throughout this time, he was presenting himself to be this very merciful person. So we were working during these times. We were working in churches. We were working with ministries that like reached out to homeless people. We were actively like on the streets, um, involved with organizations and movements that were helping um, people without homes. And we were on the, I guess, on the decision board for different organizations. We were candidating to go overseas, because that was still, in all of this craziness, that was still something that he would hold over my head. Was, if you can't get us to these countries, then we'll never make it. What's the point of our marriage if we're not going over to these countries? So in the midst of this craziness, when I couldn't even we didn't have enough stability to even like live in our town properly. He was still expecting me to somehow magically get us overseas. So what I would try to do is I would try to rein it in and say, hey, you know what? We need to really get our life in order here before we can do anything anywhere else. So, you know what, let's focus on getting our life together. And it didn't matter how much reason I poured into him. Um that was still his driving force in and throughout our marriage. Was, we need to be serving these people in these different countries, because it gave him a certain look. It gave him a certain appeal to different people and leadership. So what he was doing actually in churches is he was befriending pastors. We would go to these churches. We went to several at a time usually. He would befriend the pastors. He would get involved in ministry, and then he would try to work his way up the ladder of um, success, or the ladder of command. And once he reached, as far as he could go, um, if he was not chosen to be the leader of a ministry or the leader of something, um, then he would confront people, and he would be really explosive about it and very damaging. So that kind of led to the beginning of the end for us, really. Was he started really destroying our relationships with the people around us. He started destroying our relationships with the pastors we had, with the people that we worked with our friends in the community, with our family members. Um, he was just very angry that he wasn't a leader. He didn't have enough power. He didn't have enough prestige. He really wanted to be this person in the community, this person um, who was viewed as a leader in these I guess more humanitarian spaces in the community. And he was not willing to put the work in and to put in the time and the dedication that it takes to build up to those places. He thought that he deserved to be at the top immediately. So when he was not placed in those positions, he would destroy publicly these relationships. So it worked against him in the long run because then he started building a bad reputation for himself in the community as somebody who was volatile, as somebody who was angry and abusive to these people in leadership. Um, and that was really damaging for me. It was embarrassing. Um, it really hurt a lot of my friendships. So whenever I felt like whenever I was just getting a grasp on life, when I was just finally able to like pull myself up and get a breath of fresh air, he would, turn it crazy again. And all of a sudden I would be drowning in his chaos again. Um so that was 2 years into our marriage. All of that is only 2 years.
So you're 2 years into the marriage, and you just said that this was going to be here, like the beginning of the end, in the sense of this is now how he's acting. It's not just in the home anymore. Now, he's taking his attitude outside of your home and into the community, which is causing an other type of destruction. And you go through this twice in the
Yes.
sense of, one really big destruction within the community, and you end up leaving him the first time. So, that happens, and eventually you do come back. So what happens from like, the point where you're kind of out of the relationship a little, but still talking to him, and then kind of being brought back into the relationship?
Yes. So I leave, I go across the country, and I find out that I am pregnant. At this point, he was not in contact with me. Um, I didn't know what I was going to do. Eventually, he did reach out to me, and I was honest, and I told him that I'm pregnant. Um, at that point, he was crying. He was saying that he really wanted to make it work. He wanted to renew our vows. He would do anything that he possibly needed uh, to bring me home and to make it right so that we could raise this baby together. So, I made it very clear. He It came out early on in the marriage that he does have a diagnosed mental illness, and he does need to be on medication. So I made that a stipulation. You need to be on medication. You need to be in therapy. Um, we can never ever have a repeat of, the situation that went on, um, that caused me to leave. You can never do that again. That is not allowed. You're not going to be that type of couple. And I will not be married to somebody like that. So if you want to get back together, these are the things that are going to happen. He was supposed to be working on getting his life together. So finding a stable job, getting into therapy, getting into an outpatient program that would help him, um, regulate his self. But it ended up he did not want to do the program without me. He said that he wanted me to be there to help him and support him. So I said, okay, all right, I will walk through that with you. Um, but he was on medication, though we found out later it was not the right medication, but he was on a medication at the time. So I went back, and he seemed like he was getting his life together. It seemed like it was going really well. Though I did find out that he had, during that time we were separated, he had brought another woman into our home and was living with another woman. Um, During that time that we were separated, and he was supposed to be working on bettering himself for me and the baby. He begged me not to tell anybody. He begged me that he didn't want to be known for that. He didn't, you know, that he's put it behind him. He's moved on. She's out of his life. It's just, it was a stupid decision, and like he's so sorry, and it'll never happen again. And that was really hurtful. And I think by that point, I just was so tired of everything, and I was pregnant, and I just wanted a normal, stable life, that I was willing to say, "Okay, you know what? All right, whatever. She's out of the picture. That's done. Like, we're rebuilding." So he made it seem, and I really believed, that we were on, the upward climb. We were rebuilding our life. We were really getting along. He was really wonderfully supportive when I was pregnant. He was finally stable. He had a job that, had a great insurance plan and paid well. And it just seemed like a fresh start. And I was really, really hoping and really believing that this was it. All of that struggle was worth it, because we came out stronger, right? But after the baby was born, the habits, everything kind of collided back into a similar situation to the year before. He quit his job right when I had her and we needed insurance. He quit his job. He decided that he wanted to work downtown at the bars again. Um, he uh, found every possible situation. He found every reason to not be home with me and the baby. So she came early. My maternity leave was cut early. Kind of threw off our whole schedule for childcare and everything. So I was working full time, remotely from home, with a newborn. I was also, the only one taking care of her. I was the only one taking care of the house and cleaning. We had two dogs. I was the only one taking care of them. I did the heavy lifting. I did all the yard work. I, did all the housework, paid all the bills. I was really the one holding up our life while, being very postpartum and, just figuring out this whole mom thing on my own, basically. He then stopped paying bills. He stopped paying his truck bill. And I warned him that, if you don't pay your bills, then things happen and they will take your truck away from you. One day he gets home from work, um, and the repo guys come knocking on the door, and they're there to take his truck. So instead of realizing, "Oh, you know what? This is my fault for not paying the truck bill," he decides to lash out at the guys taking his truck. So he gets a hatchet, and he starts chasing them with a hatchet. And I'm on the front porch with our newborn, begging him to stop, because I don't want him to go to jail and just throw our life in upheaval again. He ends up damaging their truck. He doesn't damage them, which is great, but he still goes to jail. He's in jail for a couple of days, and I bail him out. Um, and this entire time, as he's going through this legal process, he now has a felony charge. As he's going through this legal process, and has the potential to go to prison. And he is in no way apologetic towards me. He is in no way thinking about, "Oh my goodness, how are you going to be, with a baby? Like, are you going to be by yourself raising this child because of my actions?" Nothing. He wants to prove that he was in the right and this guy's an idiot, and, all of this stuff. So shortly after that, he starts spiraling again, and he once again um, destroys relationships in the communities with our pastors, with our friends. He just repeats the pattern of the year before. And at that point, he's getting very verbally abusive with me again, very angry, just really cruel and destructive. He had about a 5-hour rant. Um, telling me how miserable I made him and that I was such a nagging bitch while I was holding our daughter. And it was at that moment that I realized, like, this is going to be the rest of my life. And in no way do I want this child to grow up thinking this is okay, because it's not. And it's not normal in any way. And I think that was like, um, that was my wake up call, was just holding our child and having her like in the middle of this chaos. I just knew that had to be the end. I could not do this. So I left for the second and final time, and I am I'm so very glad that I did that.
So when it comes to this part of your story in you leaving, I guess what happens from here? Now you have a child. What is the struggle with him from this point forth?
So when I first left, he was pretty shocked. Um, I actually left him a letter that detailed every single reason why I left and the ways that I had brought up these issues in the 3 years and the ways that he did not address or change these issues. That way, there was no reason to ask why because I gave him the why. But he was really confused. He couldn't believe that I left. He was very, for the first like 4 months, he tried a lot of hoovering tactics. He was very persistent. Got I got a house a couple miles away from him. Um, he would still see our daughter every once in a while, but he was in such an unhealthy place mentally. I did not want him alone with her. I didn't trust him alone with her. He was not in a place to be able to function healthily and properly with a child. So I did end up going to a domestic violence center. I wrote up a police report, and I asked for a protective order. However, when I went to submit the protective order, it was denied because there was no physical abuse allegations or no proof of physical abuse. So that was denied. We were going to go to court for it. We did go to court for it. And I was going to have to, in front of him, I was going to have to explain why I needed the protective order. But he did manage to kind of talk me out of going through with it. I kind of wish I had, but I didn't. So, you know, I I just withdrew the protective order. But after a few months I started hearing, so people knew us in this community. It wasn't a very big community and they knew that we were married. So I would start going to our local coffee shop in the morning, and it was my favorite place to go. But the baristas would start coming to me and saying, "Hey, is everything okay? Your husband was here with another woman," or like, "Hey, I saw your husband out at the bar last night with another lady," or, "Is everything okay?" So when people started talking, it really, it was like another level of pain. And, I found out he was in a relationship, within a month of me leaving. And, that was just too much for me to handle at that point. I wanted to be away from him because while he was, you know, seeing these other women and while he was making a different reputation for himself in the community, um, he was also coming to me saying, "I still love you. I still want to be with you. Can we please try? You're breaking my heart. You're taking away my daughter." Then he would try, he would use threats. He would threaten that he was going to put our daughter in foster care, that he was going to take her away, that he was going to get full custody. He would threaten those things. But I knew that he did not have the responsibility or the wherewithal to actually make good on those threats. So, filed for divorce. He didn't even bother reading the divorce packet. He just signed everything. So I got full custody. He agreed to visitation only. And then I moved across the country back to my family. Um, and he has been, since I moved, he has not once asked if we needed anything. He is. hardly checked in on his daughter. He missed Christmas. He didn't do anything for Christmas, didn't do anything for her birthday, didn't bother calling for weeks before or after each, holiday. Um, he really he complains when he has to send money. But then he, complains to his family and has a different story about, um, how I'm keeping his child away from him. So it's I I'm actually really relieved that he has been less of an issue than I thought that he would be. He really does not want to be a dad. And that's okay. It can be hard financially. Um I'm very proud of myself that I've had to, out of necessity, grown even more in my career and gotten to a very great place. And I'm proud of myself for doing that, but it's, sucks that I have to push so hard and work so hard um, because her father doesn't want any involvement at all. So it's a blessing for the most part. I know people can have really nasty um, custody battles and things like that. For the most part, he's left us alone, and I guess that's what he wanted, and it's what needs to happen. So
So when it comes to yourself and living in chaos for a big part of your life, for most of your life, really,
yeah,
how is it now being out of it? Yeah, yes, it's a struggle being a single mom, but as far as, peace and, what you want out of your life from here on out, how do you view all of that and, unpacking everything that happened and moving through everything? Where were you in that as far as grief and, the idea that this was the relationship that I wanted? A lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to get married. I'm going to have my kid, two and a half kids, white picket fence type life. And now that is gone. So is there a grief period about that? And how are you handling yourself and your own self-care during this time?
yeah, yeah. The grief was really hard. I would say the first 6 months were definitely the hardest because, yeah, it's the death of the life that I thought I was going to have. And even though that life would never have been possible with him, being in this type of relationship, it they have a way of stringing you along and bringing you back to that promise of this is what life is going to be like. Remember, this is what we're doing. This is what life could be like. And he would say that all the time, like, oh, we're gonna have such a beautiful life. Oh, we're gonna have such a beautiful life. So that dream was always kind of dangled in front of me, but just out of reach. And that was so frustrating. So to actually have to face that dream was never going to happen, was really, really hard. It was never going to happen the way that I thought it was going to happen. Um, you know, it was really hard. The first 6 months I was angry. I don't think I've ever felt such anger or honestly hatred in my life. Like, I actually thought, like, was is there something wrong with me? I felt such an anger and such a hatred at him, at myself. I don't know. It was just this pure hatred and anger. I think at the fact that I felt so used and so lied to and then just thrown away. It, it was really a struggle. I've never felt hatred before in my life. I am happy to say that I've moved past that now. Um, but I think it was really necessary to feel all of that because yeah, it's a lifetime of use and abuse and lies and like using these ideals to control or to manipulate. And kind of just, yeah, working through all of that, there was a lot of really, really hard emotions, but I knew that if I wanted to do this in a healthy way, that I needed to feel those things and to sit with them. I did go to therapy. I haven't been back since I moved back. But the first 5 months of separating, I was in therapy and I went to a divorce care program, which was like a 12-week divorce kind of like support group program. That was actually really helpful. Um, the anger was definitely the hardest, I think, for me. The first 6 months was the hardest. Um, and then the last 6 months have been, it's coming up on right at almost a year since I left. And these last 6 months have been a lot more sad. I felt a lot of sadness at Um, just kind of the person that he is, like how sad that he is this type of person when he has the potential to be so much more. Sad that that the dreams that I had aren't, the same. But I'm good now. I feel like I tried to do this in a really healthy way because I have a child now, so I can't, you know, I I have to work through this in a healthy way. So I I feel much better. I feel very peaceful. And yeah, for the first time in my life, pretty much I feel I I'm finding myself thinking, "Oh, am I doing enough?" Like, I know that I'm working full time and then taking care of my child outside of that, and I still feel sometimes like I need to be doing something else to prove myself, to prove my worth to somebody, to some imaginary person, I don't know, to myself maybe. I feel like I should be I live in an area where I pass by, these um people living on the streets, and I think, "Oh, I need to I need to get connected with somebody to help them. I need to get connected with a program so that I can start doing these things." And for the first time in my life, I have to be like, "No, I don't need to do that right now. What I need to do is focus on my life. I need to focus on me. I need to focus on my daughter. I need to focus on getting us to a place that's really stable and secure. And then when the time is right, I'll find, a place that I can plug into and help. But I do not need to jump into helping every lost soul, every, person that looks like they need help. I really need to focus on myself. And that's been something that I catch myself doing a lot. And I just have to kind of recalibrate and remind myself, no, what got me here in the first place?
And Tori, if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
I don't think I I don't think I believed in myself enough. I don't think I believed that I was capable of living the life that I wanted to live on my own without anybody's help. Or, without I didn't have to I was kind of depending on this person to help me achieve in a way, in a less terrible way. Kind of, I was hoping that this person would help me to achieve the life that I wanted, the dream life. Um, and I was really afraid, I think, to step out and live that life on my own. And I would just say, you know, don't be afraid to go for the life that you want and, step out on your own. It's a big step, but it's so much more worth it than staying and trying to like, you know, beat the dead horse of a relationship that's just never going to work. So, I know that's harsh maybe. Um but I wish somebody had just been really frank with me when I was in this relationship and nobody was. And so, yeah, if I could just say that, like, you are completely capable of living the life that you dream of and want without this person in your life. So,
Well, Tori, I really want to thank you for being here with us today. And you did a really good job of telling your story and translating it for everyone in a very clear way. And I really can't thank you enough for being here with me today, sharing your story. We're doing this. You're in a car. We've done episodes before where someone has been in their car recording, for privacy and needing that. So I really can't thank you enough for being here and sacrificing your time. So a really big thank you from the bottom of my heart and from everyone else who is listening today.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon.
Well, thank you once again, Tori, for being here with us today. And if you want to be a guest like Tori was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Top of the page, there's a button that says guest form. When you click on that button, it takes you to our guest form page. There, you can read all of our instructions and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. And if you are someone who needs support, we have a support group at our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Top of the page, you press on that support group button and it takes you to our very own safe social network. And there you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on and to get the validation that you need. And you can validate other survivors just like you too. So that is at our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. And if you need even more support, please do visit our friends at domesticshelters.org. At domesticshelters.org, they have articles and resources to help you make sense of what you are dealing with. They have every phone number, email address, and website address for shelters and agencies, no matter how big or small the town you are in. Domesticshelters.org has it there. It is a wonderful free resource. So if you need extra support, please do go to domesticshelters.org. And that is it for today's story. So from myself and Tori, we hope you have a good night.